And now we're going to have our leaders panel. And the moderator for the leaders panel is James Harding. James was the director of news and current affairs at the BBC, the world's largest news organization, until January 2018. Prior to that, he was the editor of the Times of London from 2007 to 2012, winning the newspaper of the year in 2 of the 5 years he edited the paper. He was previously the Times business editor, having joined from the Financial Times, where he worked as Washington bureau chief, media editor, and China correspondent, opening the paper's bureau in Shanghai in 1996. Oh my goodness, he's done so much. He is the author of Alpha Dogs, How Political Spin Became a Global Business. And he presented on Background on the BBC World Service with Zanny Minton-Beddoes, editor of The Economist. So I'm going to hand over right now to James, who's going to lead on this panel.
Shola, thank you very much. You can see me smiling / blushing. I didn't expect quite that intro. That is really, that's really a bit much. Even I think my mum.
My hat's off to you. My hat's off to you.
Very much.
Incredible.
Well, listen, I'm really pleased to be involved in this because, as Shola just said, I left the BBC just over 3 years ago now to set up Tortoise. And one of the first things we did was try to think about how do you actually not add to the breaking news, heaven knows there's enough of that, but how do we understand what's driving the news? And central to that, the way in which businesses operate. And it seemed to us that there would somehow be a way of looking at corporate responsibility, not in perhaps the classic way, but trying to measure the outputs of businesses, the impact of businesses up against the Sustainable Development Goals. And so when we started measuring that and we put together an index called the Responsibility 100 Index, we probably shouldn't have been surprised that RELX came so high up the index. If you want to go and have a look at all the details, do, but you'll see that, RELX comes up ahead of Unilever, up ahead of Diageo. The latest index, it comes third of all the FTSE 100 companies. And it does that, I think, because at its heart, it's trying to think about how does what it does as a business correspond to those UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the heart of our conversation in the next 45 minutes is really to focus on how do you do that? How do you avoid rhetorical commitment, a lot of talk around this, and deliver actual outcomes, the walk around all of this. And I'm delighted, we're going to be joined by 3 people who are central to that in their businesses, and I think who've demonstrated it. And I hope we're going to be able to hear from all of them. I'm going to start, if I might, with Kumasal Bayezid. Kumasal, are you there? I'm just going to make sure that I can see.
Yes, I am. Hi, James.
Thank you for doing this. I suppose what I'm going to do is slightly cheat, because I think that trying to do, Elsevier's commitment to each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals will probably puncture the punctuality of this whole thing. So why don't we start, and I'm really interested to see how you think about this, because I know you were kind of chief strategy for RELX, but you're now running a shop, and for the world, a very important one in Elsevier. How do you think, let's start with, if you like, the planet side of the SDGs, all of the climate issues, biodiversity, environmental pollution impacts. How do you think about those issues from the Elsevier point of view?
Sure. And across all these issues, James, we kind of try to think of what do we need to do in our own house to make sure we're contributing to the SDGs at 8,600 people we have at Elsevier. And then we look at how do we actually contribute to the communities we serve and to overall societal progress with the communities we serve, because we serve primarily researchers and health professionals. In the first category, we're doing a couple of things. As you know, RELX was net zero on scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 travel this year. So we've been working on our climate goals for the last decade. We've set them up in 2010, and we worked through them in 2020. We achieved all the goals that we set out, and we exceeded some of them by achieving net zero. Now we're going to tackle scope 3, which is a lot more difficult and a lot more complicated. We're just launching a climate advisory board made up of leading experts for Elsevier, who's going to help us in this journey to make sure that we can solve all the hurdles pragmatically. With Scope 3, there are a lot of hurdles, and we're going to start with cloud hosting. So that's what we're doing as Elsevier to make sure we mitigate our impact on the climate, and we support the net zero goals globally.
Yes, so can I just ask you one thing? Sorry, you're going to go on, and I'll jump in a second. Sorry.
Sure. And then if you look at what we're doing in terms of the communities that we serve, we are one of the leading publishers for sustainability science. We make up 50% of the citations, for example, in environment science. So we really had a very focused strategy to say, how can we contribute to publish the best science out there, working in collaboration with the researchers to support sustainable development goals? So we made it very intrinsic to our business and to our day-to-day activities that we do as a business.
So Kumsal, I wanted to, I'm going to bring the other two in a moment, and then we'll have a conversation, but I wanted to start off on this, and particularly I think for everyone joining, you've got an interesting question, which is the first half, the how do we ourselves behave, right? Do we, practice what we preach? But what you preach is particularly important because of the scientific community that works for Elsevier and the scientific and like public community that you speak to. So how do you manage the complexity of the issues that you're covering? And I'm thinking around earth sciences here, not all the other areas, but at the same time, making sure that information is as widely as available as possible and digestible, kind of accessible intelligence.
Yeah. Those are great questions, James, and I would like to say it's an ongoing journey to achieve those goals. So if you look at Elsevier's core strengths, we have 2,600 journals, and we work with around 80,000 editors around the globe and millions of researchers. So we have a huge machinery that enables us strategically to focus what we publish on the areas that matter. And that's primarily how we work through it. And we work through it really with the communities we serve, James, because we're not the experts in everything. It's the communities we serve who are the experts. To our editorial boards and 80,000 experts that we work with, we mine their wisdom to ensure that our publishing focuses on the areas that's going to move the needle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there's a danger here, Kumsal, which is I have a lifelong struggle with timekeeping, and I can really get into scientific journalism as a subject, and then we'll forget about Hugh and Philippe, and they'll say, "What am I doing waiting in the, in the electronic green room?" But let me bring in Hugh, if I might, because Hugh Pope, Hugh Chones, sorry, Hugh Pope is a very, very old family friend of mine. Hugh, apologies. I'm really interested in how you see this, because I imagine you've got the same issues that Kumsal's got in terms of content, but a host of other issues in terms of how you deliver on a climate agenda when you're running a big exhibitions business.
Right. We don't have journals per se, but we do interact with the world around us in a very face-to-face way. Post-COVID, of course, we have shows, over 400 of them all over the world, and it's our opportunity to use those shows as a platform for various topics of great relevance for the world. That's what we do. When it comes to sustainable development, when we have a purpose, we have an obligation to actually serve as a megaphone for those types of SDGs that we think the world should hear about, and bring together not only exhibitors, but also visitors that want to learn more about it. We can do that in lots and lots of ways. And we do that certainly at our shows, but that's not enough. There are plenty of others in the exhibitions business that also want to participate in these sorts of things. And so as a result, we partner with our other industry members, so our competitors, if you will, to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we formed a group along with an association that we work with quite closely called UFI, which is a global association of the exhibitions industry, to begin to create a net zero pledge, not simply for us. And that's something RELX certainly would do, but for the whole industry, all of us. What happens at a show? How do we buy electricity, and how do we use it? How do we allow people to exhibit? So on things like that, for example, we believe that having 30 meetings in a single day is a whole lot better than flying around the world 30 different times to have those meetings. So we think by virtue of what we do, we make an impact. But while you're at the show, we should be able to have the tracks to educate you about the SDGs that you're interested in, and we do that as well. So much like Kumso with the journals, we use our shows as the vehicle for getting our points across on all sorts of matters in those SDGs.
And Hugh, I'm going to bring Philippe in one moment, but I'm really intrigued to hear about your year, right? Because I was one of those people who, I suppose, in March of 2020, got religion around Zoom. And I was like so excited about the idea of being able to hook up with people wherever they were in the world, whenever it was. And of course, I did what a lot of people have done, is in the course of the year, gradually miss more and more, and not just emotionally, practically, the business of meeting face to face, and realize just quite how different that is. I appreciate that we're not done yet. I appreciate that the pandemic globally is far from done. So will you just tell us how the intersection of the two things, the sort of climate agenda on the one hand and the practicalities of the pandemic on the other, have informed the way in which you, in running the Reed Exhibitions business, think about the next, let's be realistic, sort of 12 to 24 months?
I think the pandemic has hastened some of our technological advances, not again simply for RELX, but for the industry. We've learned as an industry, but certainly at RELX and Reed Exhibitions, how to use technology in order to deliver value for those people who can't come to a show, or for those people who want to have a dialogue with those exhibitors over a longer period of time than simply 3 to 5 days. So we've used technology quite professionally now to either extend the import of the show or deepen what you get when you're at a show, so that every step you take is more efficient. Every conversation you have is more purpose-driven and meaningful to whatever it is you're trying to do. Will those types of solutions, I'm talking about digital solutions, ever completely obfuscate the need for face-to-face show? In my opinion, in the data that I look at, no, they won't. In the same way that if you tell someone we're going to go to Disneyland to go walk around a castle, that's different than watching a Disney movie. So it's the same thing. Humans like face-to-face interaction, and we will embrace both, but we will not be walking away from digital. In fact, every single one of our shows has a digital component to either expand or deepen the attraction and depth of connection.
And Hugh, does that correspond? Sorry, there's a bit of a feedback. But does that correspond to what your likely footprint is going to be? Is there actually a benefit on the digital side for the climate agenda?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because first of all, it allows us to have a much deeper relationship with the folks who are interested in those sorts of things. I'll give you an example. We may well have had a travel show, but now we can have travel shows that look at eco-travel throughout the whole year. And we can have groups that are interested in eco-travel throughout the whole year, not simply thinking about it through 3 or 4 days. In the energy space, we have many clean tech energy shows, but many of those clean tech energy shows can now make impact throughout the entire year, not simply through the 3 or 4 days. So if a new innovation comes up in wind or geo or solar or wave, we can stream it out to that audience without waiting 4 or 5 months for them to find out about it at a show. I can get that to them that afternoon. So again, it helps us fulfill our purpose, which is essentially to bring knowledge together and make sure that people walk away with a better understanding of whatever it is they're interested in before we got involved.
I want to talk to you both about leadership within this context, your leadership and the leadership you look for from other people. But I'm going to bring in Philippe Diaz first, because actually, without making Philippe blush, actually Schneider Electric, the company that he works for, is one of those businesses that has came out. I know it's very fashionable this year, Philippe, to be making climate commitments. The truth is, Schneider Electric has been making them for a while. And I just wondered whether you could tell us, I mean, I read up about Schneider Electric and its 1.5 degrees commitment. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how those things happen within a big business like yours, how it makes a commitment like that.
Yeah, so as you said, thanks, James. I mean, it's nothing new, in fact, for Schneider. I mean, we've been committed to sustainability and carbon reduction for years. I mean, it's part of our DNA. And I would say it's an act of leadership, of vision and leadership first, to stay this kind of commitment and to state it on a continuous basis for the last 15 years. So we have made that. We have designed, I would say, the management tools to measure the impact and follow our performance versus the impact. We have all our, everybody who has a variable component in its compensation is measured as this, as part of the incentives. In any decision we take regarding an investment, we take a carbon price in the equation. So that's, I would say we've learned over the years, I would say, to include in all our management decisions, topics around sustainability and especially carbon pledge. So that's one aspect. Now the other aspect is that we also help our clients. That's what I talked about was mostly for ourselves and our suppliers. But we also help our clients, be more effective in terms of decarbonizing the whole supply chain. So whether by providing what we call green premiums, that means we develop specific products or solutions. So using a function which has been sold for years, but developed in a way which is more sustainable, less carbon, more recycling capabilities, etc. That's one aspect. And we also, another additional angle is that we've developed a specific consulting organization, which I'm part of, in fact, which is helping our clients, especially a lot of the similar industries, to decarbonize, to do what we've done, but help them accelerate in that. So we consider us also as part of our mission, I would say, to overall contribute to the decarbonization of the industrial world. So that's really, I would say, in summary, it's in our DNA, and it's a long-term commitment from our top management year after year, with clear measurements, clear visibility to very low level in the organization.
Philippe, thank you. I want to, firstly, just to say, if you want to interrupt each other, please do. Okay. It will make me look slightly less bad because I keep on interrupting you, but also you'll have things to say in response to each other. What I was keen to do is try and understand sort of some of the practical examples of how things change. And I wanted to start, I want to talk a bit about business and the SDGs, but also about people in the SDGs. Right. And the business in the SDGs part of this is, historically businesses have a very complicated set of relationships with both their customers and their suppliers. Suppliers, they want to get the best possible deal at the lowest possible price, and customers, whatever they do, they want to keep them on side. In both contexts, going into them and saying, yes, we'll do business with you, but we've also got a set of other requirements that you have to fulfill if we're going to either pitch to you or buy from you. And I just wondered, in practical terms, how you found it. I'm actually going to ask you, Hugh, the first, if I might, just because I imagine Reed Exhibitions has probably in some ways that largest of kind of human customer base, but also an incredibly complicated supplier base.
Well, thank you. I think it's important to understand that it's not true that businesses today simply focus on profitability. Even at RELX, which is a public company, you might think that it's all about hitting a profit number at the end of the quarter. That is not simply true anymore. You simply cannot operate a strong functioning business in a world of inequality, poverty, climate change, and do nasty things. You'll lose your business, and you'll lose it fast. You'll lose your employees because they won't feel a sense of purpose. You'll lose your customers because they don't want to buy from you. And you might lose your job because it's going to start going down when everyone else runs away. So just so we're clear, you need to be able to embrace these SDGs if you want to actually remain in business these days. So that's number one. Number two, if you do it well, you can instill a sense of purpose in all stakeholders. So when my employees come to work and work on a show, I want them to know that we care as a world that they showed up on that Monday morning and that it mattered. So if you're working for a clean tech show, I want them to know that it matters, that the world understands how, yes, we all need lithium to create batteries. I get it. We all need rare earths to create windmills in order to create, that's true, that comes from the group, but how we do it, what can we do that makes that more efficient? How do we get those vendors that have new cutting edge technology to show up at our shows so that everyone can see and hear what they're actually doing? That's purpose. That's Strive. That's get people up, and we're happy. We have the platform to create that sense of purpose for our employees, and it's something we're very proud of here.
And Kunsal, can I ask you about? I kicked off by saying the kind of planet side of this. What about the people side? What about all of the issues in the SDGs that, frankly, are sometimes more difficult to measure, and also are more political in certain countries and jurisdictions? How do you think about that within the context of Elsevier?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, James. And if I can just add on to what Hugh said, I think going forward, if businesses want to have a competitive differentiation and be able to get the best talent, we need to have mission-driven businesses where people find meaning in work, because that drives engagement for our employees. And SDGs are a wonderful framework to drive that engagement and to be able to actually measure the outcomes and the progress that you gain. So let me talk to you about the people side of things, and what we focus on, and this is my sort of passion over my lifetime, is around inclusion and diversity at Elsevier. And we, again, approach inclusion and diversity the same way we approach climate. What are we doing in our own house, and what are we doing with the communities we serve? In our own house, we actually have employee resource groups. So it's driven by the passion and the commitment of our people in terms of what kind of change they want to drive. And what we've done, I call it, there's horizontal and vertical approaches to it. Horizontally, our primary approach is training around psychological safety, because we know psychological safety drives inclusive behaviors. And we've also done unconscious bias training, because we also know that that drives inclusive behaviors. And that's horizontal and fundamental and lifts all boats. Then we have specific diversity dimensions. There's 5 we're focusing on right now. We have gender, we have race and ethnicity, we have LGBTIQ+, we have abilities, we call it Elsevier enabled, and we also have generations, where age comes into play. And through these 5 dimensions, we have various different action sets that we measure. I meet with these teams quarterly. Each one has an executive sponsor, each one is a business sponsor, and each one is an HR sponsor. And we are really moving the needle. As you know, change, real compelling change in diversity, there are no silver bullets for it. It's really hard work, and it's lots of small steps that add up to actually measurable progress over time. So that's our approach at Elsevier. Externally, with the communities we serve, we also have an inclusion and diversity advisory board that we formed last year. I co-chaired that with Dr. Richard Horton, who's the editor-in-chief of The Lancet. Yes. And we have medical experts and all kinds of scientific experts on that board, from countries all the way through Japan to US. And they actually inform the work we can do to support inclusion and diversity in the research and healthcare communities. And we identified 3 areas that we're working systematically on. One is representation in research. So we are working on representation in our editorial boards. First, we started with gender. Next, we'd like to tackle nationality and race and ethnicity, because Global South representation is very important at editorial boards as well. The second thing we're doing is actually factoring in gender and race into the research itself. Research is most medical research is still done for the Northern European male anatomy. And if you look at statistics, AI technologies have an error rate of 35% for Black women versus 2% for white men. So there's a lot of actually factoring in this into the research that needs to happen at the researcher stage. And we do a lot both in policy development with the communities we serve, but also training early career researchers so they know what they need to factor in as they design their research. And lastly, we support career progression. And that's about making sure, for example, we have really great coverage and representation in peer reviewers that we work with, because that usually is a career progression step to get onto an editorial board and learn your discipline really, really well. But we also work with a lot of early career women from underdeveloped nations and underrepresented communities. And we also have focus on now with our SAL brand on Black Rising Scientist Award that we give every year to an early career researcher. So again, lots of little things, no silver bullets, but they add up.
And Kunsal, just to understand, I see the sort of the 5 elements of the internal processes around diversity inclusion. What you were just describing there is within the research communities outside the employment group at Elsevier itself.
Yes, the latter part, yeah. The work with our editorial boards, with early career researchers, and factoring in gender and race into the research design is the work we're doing with the communities we work with, primarily researchers and research leaders.
And I'm presuming that the people that you work with would not take kindly to fuzzy maths, to inaccurate data on this. And so how much do you find they are willing to open up in terms of giving, details about representation on editorial boards, detail about, opportunities and career progression? Yeah. How does that work?
So we have actually cracked the code on gender, not on race and ethnicity. So this year, it's interesting you say that, James. So gender, we've been able to actually create machine learning algorithms that understands as a proxy what the gender of the research paper authors are on an anonymized basis. So we have been publishing a gender report now that shows by discipline, by country, the representation of women in different disciplines and how that's progressing over time. And you can see there, for example, Portugal is the best, most successful country in Europe in terms of achieving gender equity amongst different countries. And we just did a deep dive with lots of different Portuguese stakeholders, including government officials, to understand how 20 years of policy actually got them there. So we do that, and we've cracked the code on gender, and we now have editorial board gender makeup on our journal websites. We have that for 600 of our journals. By the end of the year, we'll have it for all of them. And we compare that to the makeup of the discipline. So what is the editorial board makeup versus the discipline makeup? Because energy is barely 20% woman, whereas medicine is 50-50 today. In terms of race and ethnicity, I've just gotten off a IND advisory board meeting where we're trying to create a taxonomy that can actually look at race and ethnicity globally, because we're a global business. And that's been a very eliminating exercise. We first have to figure out we can do this legally, and we can globally everywhere. It will always be optional and opt-in, but we're going to ask our authors and our editors whether they are willing, only if they're comfortable, to share their race and ethnicity with us. We're going to A/B test this. We're going to see how well it works. And if we get even 60% opt-in across all Elsevier journals, we'll have some really meaningful data.
And can I ask you, Kumsal, it's absolutely fascinating. When you have conversations with sort of fellow CEOs, presumably people are doing similar things, not the same things, and some of them, frankly, I'm sure, are not doing things as granular or as technological level as that. Is there a world in which these kinds of processes get shared, so best practice moves from one company to the next? Or is it, and maybe there's no harm in it if it is, or are these competitive advantages? Because, Hugh talks about actually feeling a sense of purpose when you come in Monday morning to work for a Reed exhibition. Do you view this stuff as a competitive thing or a collaborative thing? How do you figure out what's best?
When it comes to inclusion and diversity, there's no competition, there's only collaboration. So we absolutely see this as an asset and an approach we built that we will share with anyone who's willing to do this. And we do work actually with other publishers as well. So we have this race and ethnicity taxonomy that we developed was a group of publishers coming together, including actually it's Royal Society of Chemistry who led the charge and brought together a group of publishers. And we worked through the detail as a group of publishers to come up with that taxonomy.
Right. So thank you. Philippe, can I ask you about this? I imagine that, given your business, it's not surprising that everyone's very focused on what you do environmentally, but this people side internally, and also I'm interested in, the SDGs focus a lot about inequality. They focus a lot on education. They focus a lot on access to employment. When you try to get the company to think about those elements of the Sustainable Development Goals, what kind of buy-in are you finding around that?
Yeah, no, actually, people is as important as climate for us, to be honest. I was mentioning about how we were tracking our progress versus SDGs, and in fact, I was looking at that when you were talking about half of our KPIs are on people. Half is on circularity and climate, but half is about people. So and it's also same on gender diversity and especially generation diversity as well and gender diversity. So making sure that we have very strict objectives on how many what should be the level of gender diversity by a layer in the organization, not only the top but also very much down into the organization. We also have objectives in terms of how many jobs we should propose to apprenticeship. So we want to increase that. So that people is very important, and that's for our own employees. Now, for people in general, we have also what we call access to energy programs, which are and we have a clear objective on that, which is to provide energy, renewable energy to what we call the bottom of pyramid. So people in countries which have no access to energy, we consider that energy is a human right, in fact, because it is a basic, it's a base of any development. If you don't have access to energy, economy does not develop. So we want to provide to the people who are in the lowest level of in terms of in poverty, access to this renewable energy, and we have a program run in many countries of Africa and Asia and India, for instance, for quite some time. We also, training is also important. So we have an objective on training on the energy management, about 1 million people in the next 5 years. So that's typically the kind of people type of objective. And to be honest, I think I agree with what you said. To me, this is critical as an objective, but also to motivate our employees to be part of Schneider. And especially the young generation, they want enterprise to be meaningful. To be part of, to have a mission and to recognize themselves into that. So that we see that as a fundamental. Way to attract, and motivate our key employees.
Philippe, thank you. I want to, because I realize we've got sort of 10 minutes or so left. I want to talk about, or get a sense of you, how you think about leadership within the business around this sense of purpose. Your personal one, but also I'm really interested how, if people have got ideas inside the company, they can then come forward and say, I've got this really good idea. How do we make this happen? And don't feel as though either the hierarchy or the bureaucracy or heaven knows what gets in the way. I'm going to start, Hugh, if I might, with you, because you're, I suppose, the most people of the people businesses in exhibitions.
Well, it has something to do with what Kumsal said regarding psychological safety. We need people to come forward with ideas and feel safe about doing it. Let me explain. I need you to be able to feel perfectly safe in placing a bet at a show, a bet that may well attack one of the SDGs. In fact, I want to see a whole bunch of them, and I want to see that they're different than the bets you placed last year.
Right.
And what will happen is they won't all work. Some will, and some won't. Here's the thing. The failures of the bets that don't work still make my employees better in the future than they were in the past. As long as you can make intelligent bets, then the failures teach you just as much as the successes. And we embrace that too. We celebrate it. Outstanding, we say. What did we learn from that one? And you know what? It works really, really well. And so if you can build a culture as the chief executive, build a culture where failure is not is actually embraced. Intelligent failure, not careless failure. Intelligent failure is embraced and awarded. You've actually unlocked this sort of spirit of entrepreneurialism within your employees and to your customer base. They love it because every single show is a little bit different than the one before because they never know what we're going to come up with next. Don't you want to come? Makes me want to come. And you can really start looking at various different SDGs that you want to really start exploring at all the shows. I have over 400, so you can bet whether it's gender or whether it's energy or whether it's clean tech or all those sorts of things. We should be able to place more bets than just about anyone on the planet. That's our job. And we need to embrace it, even when we stub a toe and it doesn't work out quite the way we thought it would. So what? We learned and we go forward.
Can I ask you, I haven't heard that distinction, Hugh, but between intelligent failure and careless failure. I suspect I'll use that and many others will too. But I want to pick up just on one thing about learning, right? Implicit in that is learning. Philippe just talked about training. There's I think, a growing question. I think one of the things that's going to creep up on us in the next few years is this question about what's the extent of the company's responsibility around skills development, lifetime education, not sort of classic, necessarily on-the-job training, but kind of life learning. And given the nature of RELX's business and the experience of Reed, but I suppose the responsibility you've got to the people who work there, the SDGs are very focused on education and opportunity. I wonder how you think about learning within the context of the company. And this is for you, Hugh.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that it's important to understand that a human being walking into a company is unlikely to stay all the way through till retirement. And so we should just embrace that. The human path may well start in one division and go to another division, or in one company into another company and then back again. And that's all okay. The way I like to think about it is this. Of course, I'd like to keep all the talent I possibly could at all times. On the other hand, as long as the person comes to us, learns, and goes to another company for something that they could not have gotten except they came to us first, we should feel as leaders proud that we did that. And then what can happen is they can come on back, and that's fine too. As long as you embrace the employees in that sort of way, you don't make them feel bad about the fact that they're always searching. You're trying to be a place where they choose to work, and they know that when they work here, they can take their career in all sorts of different directions. We are here for you. We are here to help you get along your life path in the way you choose. And to the extent that diverges, okay. To the extent that I can make it parallel, fantastic. So it's a different mindset. It's not, well, once there's a resignation, you're out of sight, out of mind. No. It's far more holistic and empathetic and caring than that.
So, Kumsal, I want to ask you the same question. First, I'd like to start with this leadership question, not yours as much as people in the business. If they've got an idea of a project they want to lead, particularly around the SDGs, how do they do that?
I wish there was a very nice process I can outline to you. That's not really how it works. I think it starts with culture. And last year, I've introduced some operating principles for the way we work as a business. And two of them are, we feel empowered to do the right thing, and we feel accountable to deliver the right results. So I really focus on empowerment and accountability as two key cultural ingredients. So people feel free when they have ideas, even a large organization, to be entrepreneurial about it and to be able to test it in a small scale by getting resources from right and left and figuring out how to actually make progress in an idea. So that's the way we're trying to embed empowerment and accountability and innovation as a part of that for our business outcomes as well. I don't know if at Elsevier, probably because we do serve the research and health community. You can imagine, James, we have a lot of ideas and a lot of passion around this. And as a leader, I almost need to surf the wave and make sure that I allocate the resources properly, make sure everybody feels supported, interfere when there's a need for interfering, and just really sponsor the activities. But all the thinking and the passion and the ideas and the innovation really comes from our people. And they're very engaged in making progress, and there's a lot of ideas. Ultimately, I think the ideas that make it through the hoops end up coming to my management team. So we had one around climate change recently, and then we approve it when it needs specific resourcing or additional effort to make it happen.
So and Kumsal, this is going to come under the heading of airing private grief in a public place, but I want to ask you just one thing about the SDGs in particular. You can't have lived through 2020 into 2021 without feeling as though we're living through an information crisis, A, on health, and B, on climate. In different parts of the world, different groups of people just don't have access to enough information. And you sit there on Elsevier with, heaven knows, a body of information. How do you think about that in regard to the company's responsibility to the SDGs? How do you make accurate information available to the widest possible audience?
Sure. So let me just pick up what happened with the pandemic. We started making all of the coronavirus research available to everybody to use for free and to be able to data mine with machine learning technologies on January 30th. before there was even an official pandemic. And Elsevier has done throughout the decades, every time there's a global health crisis, we make all the content available for free. In addition to that, we made all of our products, not just the content, available for research teams or healthcare teams that needed information on this. And we have given any research team that was working on a particular COVID-19 research all of the assets that we have free of charge for them to be able to use. We've taken also this connection we have from researcher to healthcare professional, and we took all the latest research because the research was evolving so fast. And we have actually turned that into digestible information and send it to the front lines every day as a reliable source of information with the Elsevier stamp on it. And James, I have to say one of my highlights last year is I got an email from a nurse, and she was in one of the islands in the Caribbean. I'm not going to remember it now. And she was thanking us because she said that the briefing she read that morning from Elsevier saved her patient's life because she doesn't.
An amazing story.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
Kumsal, I wish we could. It's almost those things, isn't it? There's kind of actually very, very personal stories that kind of illuminate it all. I'm going to end, if I might, by giving Philippe the last word. And actually, I'm going to ask you, Philippe, for a personal story. I saw when I was preparing for this a blog you'd written, which must be a year or so old now, 5 years after Paris, right?
Yes.
And it was after the COP in Paris, and it was about how you take the circus that is COP and then deliver results afterwards. And I just wondered, I'm in the UK, as you could tell, we're all really focused on COP26.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered, what's your lesson in terms of, as a country, but also as companies, how do you make COP26 deliver?
Yeah, so I think to me, maybe before answering exactly that, I think the ingredients for success is basically acceleration. Today we have, all the stakeholders, at least in the business world, are aligned that we need to improve, our sustainability position. We need to reduce carbon footprint. Financial market, customers, and employees, all the stakeholders are aligned. So all the technology is available, or 90% of the technology is available. So now it's a matter of getting our act together and accelerating toward that. So I wish COP26 will be focused on concrete examples of deliveries that have been done in the last 5 years, or ideas to actually go faster, even in the next couple of years. So that's, let's be pragmatic. To me, a sustainable transformation is just another enterprise change management program where clear objectives, empowerment, accountability, all what you say, Kumsal, are the key ingredients for success. So the business is ready to do that, I think. And yeah.
Philippe, I absolutely love it. I like the idea that we're going to get the heads of government of 180 countries together and we'll say, this is an enterprise change management program. Get on with it. Listen, I appreciate that we're out of time. There's so many elements of this. What's really, feels like a privilege to be a part of the conversation is hearing from each of you actually the mix of the kind of cultural points, but the granular ones on actually how you focus on these changes and how they happen. And you probably, if you get the chance, should just take a look at the comments, because it's really interesting to see what people latch onto and what they see. Not least their kind of enthusiasm for these changes, but the kind of detail in which people work on them and are thinking about them. And I know that the next session is going to think about those things in more detail, whether it's around Scope 3 or whether it's around targets and digital products, diverse workforce. I know there's a whole range of conversations to come. Thank you, Kumsal. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Philippe, for making the time. I know it's difficult to make the time to get together, but it's really been a pleasure to listen to you. I'm going to hand back to Shola and on with the day. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
What a brilliant moderation, James. Thank you so much for that. And the insightful contributions from the panelists. Thank you ever so much.